December 7, 1941. 8:06 a.m. Pearl Harbor, Territory of Hawaii. Lieutenant Commander Samuel Fuqua stood on the quarterdeck of the USS Arizona as the first wave of Japanese aircraft screamed overhead. In exactly 4 minutes, a 760-pound armor-piercing bomb would penetrate the forward magazine, and 177 men would die in 9 seconds. But what almost nobody knows is that the Arizona wasn't supposed to be there that morning. She was supposed to be 400 miles west, carrying a weapons system so revolutionary that Navy brass had classified it above top secret. A system that could have ended the Pacific War before it truly began. The Arizona wasn't just another battleship. She was the testbed for the most dangerous technological leap in naval warfare since the Dreadnought. And High Command had just made the decision that would kill her and doom the Pacific Fleet to 4 years of island-hopping carnage. Before we continue with the Arizona's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to Mare Island Naval Shipyard, California, September 1941, where the Arizona had just completed the most secret retrofit in U.S. Navy history. Commander Douglas McKinley had grown up in Terre Haute, Indiana, population 6200, where his father ran a radio repair shop on Wabash Avenue. At 19, Doug had been the youngest ham radio operator in Vigo County, building receivers from spare parts and talking to operators in 12 states. He was short, 5'7" in his dress shoes, and the Naval Academy almost rejected him for it. But what Doug lacked in height, he made up for in an almost supernatural understanding of electromagnetic radiation. By 1939, Lieutenant Commander McKinley was assigned to the Navy's Radio Research Laboratory in Washington, D.C., working on a British concept so radical that most American officers dismissed it as science fiction: radio detection and ranging. Radar. The British called it their secret weapon. They'd used it to win the Battle of Britain, detecting Luftwaffe bomber formations 100 miles away. But the British system was massive, requiring fixed installations the size of small buildings. The US Navy wanted something different. They wanted it on a ship. They wanted it to find enemy vessels before they found you, and they wanted it to direct naval gunfire with a precision that would revolutionize surface warfare. In March 1941, McKinley met Lieutenant James Peterson at a naval research conference in Annapolis. Peterson was a gunnery officer from Billings, Montana, who'd spent 6 years on battleships and watched hundreds of training exercises end the same way. American ships firing thousands of rounds at target drones, hitting maybe 3% of the time. At night or in weather, that number dropped to less than 1%. The human eye is the problem, Peterson told McKinley over drinks at the officers' club. We're trying to hit a target moving at 30 knots, from a platform moving at 25 knots at a range of 12 miles. We're using optical rangefinders designed in 1918. We might as well be throwing rocks. McKinley pulled out a notebook and sketched something. Peterson leaned forward. It was a diagram showing how radar pulses could not only detect a ship, but could feed range and bearing data directly into fire control computers. What if you didn't need eyes? McKinley said. What if the ship could see through fog, through darkness, through smoke, and tell the guns exactly where to shoot? Peterson stared at the diagram. You'd sink everything in the Pacific. Between March and July 1941, McKinley and Peterson developed what they called the Mark I Fire Control Radar System. It combined British radar detection technology with American analog computers, creating a closed-loop system where the radar painted the target and the computer calculated firing solutions automatically. The system could track up to 6 surface targets simultaneously, update their positions every 2 seconds, and direct the main battery with an accuracy improvement of 200%. In test firings at the Naval Proving Ground in Dahlgren, Virginia, Our destroyer, equipped with a prototype system, scored hits on 31 out of 35 shots at a drone target. At night, in fog, at 18 yards. The Ordnance Board was stunned. Admiral Harold Stark, Chief of Naval Operations, immediately classified the entire program as ultra-secret, the same classification level as the British Enigma decryption project. And he made a decision. They would install the Mark I system on a battleship. Not just any battleship, the USS Arizona, Pennsylvania class. 31 400 tons, 12 14-inch guns. The ship would become a floating laboratory, the test bed for a technology that could give the United States absolute supremacy in surface warfare. But there was a problem, a massive problem. Japan was running out of oil. In July 1941, President Roosevelt froze all Japanese assets in the United States and implemented a total oil embargo. Japan's military consumed 12 400 tons of oil per day. Their strategic reserves would last 18 months. After that, the Imperial Japanese Navy would be floating scrap metal. Tokyo had three options: withdraw from China and lose face, find another oil source, or go to war to seize the Dutch East Indies oil fields. They chose war. By October, American naval intelligence was intercepting Japanese diplomatic cables showing preparations for a major offensive operation. Nobody knew where: Philippines, Malaya, the Panama Canal. Naval war plans estimated the Japanese would strike sometime between November and January, somewhere in the Western Pacific. Admiral Stark faced an impossible choice. The Arizona's retrofit was 90% complete. The Mark I system was installed, calibrated, and ready for sea trials. But the ship needed another 6 weeks of testing before it could be declared operational. And naval intelligence couldn't tell him if he had 6 weeks. He made the call: cancel the sea trials. Return the Arizona to Pearl Harbor with the rest of the Pacific Fleet. The Mark I system would go into combat untested. Commander McKinley exploded when he heard the order. "Sir, you're sending that ship into a war zone with a system we've never fired in actual combat conditions. The radar is calibrated, the guns are zeroed, but we haven't run a single live fire exercise with the full integration. We don't even know if the system can handle the vibration from the main battery firing." Stark was unmovable. "Commander, if the Japanese strike the Philippines or Malaya, I need every battleship I have in Pearl Harbor ready to deploy. The Arizona sails for Hawaii on October 15th. McKinley requested permission to sail with the Arizona. Denied. Too valuable. He requested permission to send Lieutenant Peterson. Denied. Peterson had a pregnant wife in Washington. Besides, the Arizona's gunnery officer could operate the system with the technical manual. On October 22, 1941, the USS Arizona departed Mare Island Naval Shipyard. In her forward fire control tower, sealed behind a locked hatch with 2 Marine guards, sat the Mark I system. 4 radar displays, 2 analog computers, a rat's nest of cables, and a black binder labeled "For Emergency Use Only, Fire Control Radar System, Classified Ultra." The ship's gunnery officer, Lieutenant Commander Roger Whitmore, had received exactly 8 hours of training on the system. For 6 weeks, the Arizona sat at her berth in Pearl Harbor, Battleship Row, berth F7. The Mark I system remained powered down. Whitmore read the technical manual 14 times, but never activated the equipment. Navy regulations prohibited operating classified systems in port without direct authorization from CNPAC, Commander-in-Chief, Pacific Fleet. The system that could have detected the Japanese strike force 140 miles out sat dark and silent on December 6, 1941, at 11:47 p.m., Lieutenant Commander Samuel Fuqua was on quarterdeck watch when he saw a strange sight. A junior communications officer, Ensign Thomas Hayes, was running across the deck carrying a folder marked "Urgent, Priority 1." Hayes was out of breath. "Sir, radio intercept from Station Hypo. Japanese transmission spike. Estimated 6 carriers northwest of Oahu, bearing 340, distance 230 miles. Fuqua grabbed the folder. The intercept was fragmentary. Decoded Japanese Morse code showing unusual radio traffic patterns consistent with a carrier battle group, but it wasn't confirmed. It could be atmospheric interference. It could be a drill. Protocol required Fuqua to wake the captain, Franklin van Valkenburg, and forward the report to SINCPAC headquarters. But it was midnight on Saturday. Van Valkenburg had been at a dinner party at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel and had returned to his quarters exhausted. Fuqua made a decision that would haunt him forever. He filed the report in the duty officer log and decided to brief the captain at 600. What Fuqua didn't know was that at that exact moment, 6 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, were 240 miles north of Oahu, launching the first wave of 183 aircraft. At 6:00 a.m. on December 7th, Fuqua woke Captain Van Valkenburg and showed him the intercept. Van Valkenburg immediately ordered the Arizona to general quarters and requested permission to activate the Mark I system. Admiral Husband Kimmel, SINCPAC, denied the request. "Captain, that intercept is unconfirmed. I'm not authorizing activation of an ultra-classified system on a Sunday morning based on fragmentary intelligence. If you're wrong, we'll have a security breach for nothing." At 7:02 a.m., the Opana Point radar station on Oahu's North Shore detected a massive formation of aircraft 132 miles out, bearing 003 degrees. The 2 privates operating the station reported it to the Fort Shafter Information Center. The duty officer, Lieutenant Kermit Tyler, assumed it was a flight of B-17 bombers expected from California. He told them not to worry about it. At 7:48 a.m., Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, leading the first wave, radioed the Japanese carriers. "Tora, Tora, Tora! We have achieved complete surprise." At 7:55 a.m., the first bombs fell on Wheeler Field. At 8:06 a.m., Lieutenant Commander Fuqua was still on the quarterdeck, trying to understand the chaos erupting across Pearl Harbor, when he heard a sound like a freight train. He looked up. A Nakajima B-5N bomber, 200 feet above him, had just released a modified 16-inch naval shell converted into a bomb. The bomb fell for 3 seconds. It punched through the Arizona's forecastle deck at a nearly vertical angle, penetrated through the second deck, crashed through the third deck, and detonated inside the forward black powder magazine. 14,000 pounds of black powder exploded simultaneously. The force of the explosion was equivalent to 500 tons of TNT. The forward magazine's detonation triggered the adjacent smokeless powder magazine. The blast pressure was so immense that it lifted the Arizona's forward turrets, each weighing 100 tons, 20 feet into the air. The fireball reached 500 feet high. The concussion wave shattered windows in Honolulu 10 miles away. Below decks, 177 men died instantly. Most never knew they were at war. Fuqua, standing aft, was far enough away to survive the initial blast. He spent the next hour organizing firefighting efforts, evacuating wounded, and maintaining order as the Arizona settled to the harbor bottom. For his actions, he would receive the Medal of Honor. But as he watched the Arizona burn, surrounded by capsized battleships and burning oil, one thought dominated his mind. What if we'd turned it on? 4 months later, in April 1942, Commander Doug McKinley sat in a windowless office at the Navy Department in Washington, D.C., reading the Pearl Harbor investigation reports. He'd read them 11 times. Each time, he reached the same paragraph on page 147. USS Arizona, BB-39, was equipped with experimental Mark I fire control radar system, ultra classification. System was never activated prior to attack. Gunnery Officer Lieutenant C.D. Dr. Roger Whitmore, KIA, had received 8 hours of training on system operation. System remains in place aboard wreck, classified ultra, salvage prohibited. McKinley's hands were shaking. He set down the report and pulled out a folder marked Theoretical Performance Analysis, Mark I System. The analysis had been written by a team of MIT mathematicians working for the Navy. They'd been asked a simple question. If the Arizona's Mark I system had been active on the morning of December 7th, what would have happened? The answer was devastating. The Mark I radar had an effective range of 85 miles for large formations of aircraft. At 7:02 a.m., when the Opana Point station detected the Japanese formation at 132 miles, they were too far for the Arizona's radar. But by 7:30 a.m., when the formation was 60 miles out, the Arizona would have painted them clearly. At 7:30 a.m., the Arizona could have sounded general quarters. Every ship in Pearl Harbor would have had 18 minutes to prepare. Fighter aircraft could have launched from Hickam Field. Anti-aircraft batteries could have been manned. But the analysis didn't stop there. The mathematicians calculated what would have happened if the Arizona had opened fire on the incoming formation. At 7:40 a.m., with the Japanese aircraft at 35 miles, the Arizona's 14-inch guns could have engaged using radar-directed fire. The Mark I system could track multiple targets and allocate fire from the 12 main battery guns automatically. Each gun could fire 2 rounds per minute. In the 10 minutes before the Japanese reached Pearl Harbor, the Arizona could have fired 240 rounds of 14-inch anti-aircraft shells, massive projectiles with proximity fuses designed to detonate near aircraft. The mathematicians estimated each shell had a kill probability of 12% against massed formations. Expected kills, 28 aircraft. Expected damaged aircraft forced to abort, 47. The first wave consisted of 183 aircraft. If 75 aircraft were shot down or damaged before reaching Pearl Harbor, the attack would have been degraded by 41%. But the real impact was psychological. No Japanese pilot expected anti-aircraft fire from Battleship main batteries at 35 miles range. The shock and disruption would have shattered the carefully coordinated attack plan. And there was something else. The Mark I system wasn't just for anti-aircraft fire. It was designed for surface warfare. And on the morning of December 7th, 6 Japanese carriers were sitting 240 miles north of Oahu, recovering aircraft from the first wave and preparing the second wave. If the Arizona had survived the first wave, if she'd been prepared, if the attack had been disrupted, she could have sortied with the other battleships and headed north. At 25 knots, the Arizona could close to gun range of the Japanese carriers in 9 hours. The Japanese carriers had a top speed of 32 knots, but they couldn't run at flank speed while recovering aircraft. And they had to recover aircraft. They had nowhere else to go. By 5:00 p.m. on December 7th, the Arizona could have been in range. And with the Mark I system tracking targets through darkness, the Arizona could have fired on Japanese carriers at 24 miles range, well beyond the carrier's ability to launch a night strike. One battleship with radar-directed guns could have engaged 6 carriers in darkness. The mathematicians estimated the Arizona would have sunk at least 2 carriers before the Japanese fleet scattered. And if the Arizona had survived Pearl Harbor and deployed to the Pacific, the impact would have been even more profound. Every surface engagement would have been one-sided. Japanese cruisers and destroyers had no defense against a battleship that could hit them in darkness at 15 miles. The Tokyo Express supply runs to Guadalcanal would have been impossible. The naval battle of Guadalcanal, which cost the US 2 admirals and dozens of ships in chaotic night fighting, would have been a shooting gallery. With the Arizona leading the Pacific Fleet, the island-hopping campaign would have accelerated by 18 months. Instead of invading Okinawa in April 1945, US forces would have reached Japan's doorstep by September 1943. The war would have been over before the atomic bomb was ready. But none of that happened, because the system was never turned on. McKinley closed the folder and walked to the window. Outside, construction crews were expanding the Navy Department building, preparing for a long war. In May 1942, McKinley was promoted to captain and assigned to lead the expansion of radar-directed fire control systems across the fleet. The Mark I system, refined and improved, became the Mark VIII radar used on Iowa-class battleships. By 1944, every American capital ship had radar-directed guns. But the window had closed. The Japanese had learned from Pearl Harbor. They dispersed their carrier fleet. They avoided surface engagements when possible. And by the time American battleships had overwhelming radar advantages, the age of the battleship was over. Carriers decided the Pacific War, not battleships with fancy radar. In June 1942, at the Battle of Midway, dive bombers from the carriers Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown sank 4 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, in 5 minutes. The same carriers that had attacked Pearl Harbor. But it took 4 more years, 292, There were 0 American casualties and 2 atomic bombs to end the war. Lieutenant Commander Samuel Fuqua survived Pearl Harbor and served throughout the war, eventually retiring as a Rear Admiral in 1953. He never spoke publicly about the unused radar system. When asked about December 7th, he would only say, "We weren't ready." Commander McKinley stayed in the Navy until 1955, overseeing the development of advanced radar systems. He died in 1973 in Bethesda, Maryland, at age 67. His obituary in the Washington Post mentioned his contributions to naval radar systems in a single sentence. It never mentioned the Arizona. Lieutenant James Peterson left the Navy in 1945 and returned to Billings, Montana, where he opened a hardware store with his brother. He died in 1982. His family never knew about his role in developing the Mark I system. It remained classified until 1968. The USS Arizona remains at the bottom of Pearl Harbor, designated as a war grave. The Mark I fire control radar system is still inside the wreck, entombed with 177 sailors. The Navy has prohibited any salvage of the equipment due to its classification status and the sanctity of the site. In 1962, the USS Arizona Memorial was dedicated. Over 2 million people visit each year. They see the names of the dead on the marble wall. They see the oil still leaking from the wreck. Black tears, they call it. But nowhere on the memorial does it mention that inside the wreck sits a weapons system that could have changed the entire trajectory of the Pacific War. In 1989, a naval historian named Dr. Robert Cressman was researching declassified documents at the National Archives when he found a folder marked Mark I Fire Control Radar, Arizona Installation, October 1941. Inside was the complete technical specification, installation photos, and the MIT mathematical analysis of what could have happened. Cressman published a paper in the Naval War College Review titled The Weapon That Wasn't Used, Radar Fire Control at Pearl Harbor. The paper generated minor interest in academic circles, but was largely ignored by the general public. In 2003, a surviving Arizona crewman, 85-year-old Donald Stratton, gave an interview to a local newspaper in Colorado Springs. Stratton had been trapped in the burning superstructure after the explosion and had escaped by crawling across a rope thrown from the repair ship USS Vestal. The interviewer asked if there was anything the Arizona could have done differently that morning. Stratton paused for a long time, then he said, "There was equipment on that ship, special equipment. We were told never to talk about it. I don't know if it would have mattered, but we never turned it on, that's all I can say." He died 6 months later. He was one of 5 Arizona survivors still alive. Today, there are none. The last surviving crew member of the USS Arizona, Lou Conter, passed away in April 2024 at age 102. The Arizona is silent now. The oil has almost stopped leaking. In another 30 years, the wreck will collapse completely, and the Mark I system will be buried forever under steel and silt. But somewhere, in a warehouse in Pearl Harbor, there's a black binder, stamped in faded red letters. For emergency use only, fire control radar system, classified ultra. Nobody has opened it since 1941. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the fine margins between victory and defeat, about the weapons we build but never use, about the young men who died with a secret locked away in their ship, we need you to do something. Hit that like button. It's not just for us. It's for every veteran who fought with courage but never got credit. It's for every engineer who built something revolutionary that history forgot. Subscribe to this channel. We tell stories like this every week, stories of innovation under fire, stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, stories that deserve to be remembered. And leave us a comment. Tell us where you're watching from, your country, your city. Tell us if someone in your family served. Tell us what you think. Could the Arizona have changed the war, or was it already too late? We have viewers from Texas to Tokyo, from Sydney to Stockholm. Every comment, every like, every share keeps these stories alive. Thank you for honoring these forgotten heroes. Thank you for caring about the truth even when it's painful. And thank you for making sure that Lieutenant Commander McKinley, Commander Peterson, and the 177 men of the Arizona are never truly forgotten.